Skip, how do nonprofits qualify for ERTC?
Well, Jonathan, let me give you a little bit of background about the ERTC first, because not everyone watching this video will know all of the details. So we were heading into COVID. It was ugly. Things were starting to shut down. California had already been shut down. Congress was afraid that it was going to destroy the economy, so they passed the CARES Act, March 27th, 2020. In the CARES Act, there were two parts, the PPP, Payroll Protection Plan, and then the ERTC, the Employee Retention Tax Credit. So the PPP was designed to keep businesses in business. And frankly, it did a pretty good job. I speak with business owners every week that would have gone out of business if they hadn't gotten one or two PPP loans. Now, the second part was the Employee Retention Tax Credit Program. So Congress wanted to persuade, incentivize businesses to keep their employees on payroll. Why? Well, they had seen in the Great Recession of 08 and 09 that businesses were fast to fire and slow to hire. And obviously that's not good for the economy, but also they were afraid that the state unemployment rolls wouldn't be able to handle the influx of people or be able to afford to pay them. So they made this promise. If you, Mr. or Mrs. Business Person, will keep your employees on payroll, we'll reward you down the road. If you qualify one of two different ways, we'll reward you by returning some of your withholding taxes. And so no one heard about it. No one heard about the ERTC because in the CARES Act, you had to choose between one or the other. And everybody heard about PPP. It was all over newspapers, media, everywhere. So no one paid attention to the ERTC. Well, 9 months to the day later, on December 27th, 2020, Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act. In that act, they said, yes, you can take both. There are some restrictions on overlapping with PPP money, but you can take both. And that was for 2020. That was the first part of it was for second, third, and fourth quarters of 2020. A business owner or a nonprofit organization could receive a tax credit. It arrives as a refund, actually, of up 50% of the first $10,000 in qualified wages for each employee. So that's up to $5,000 per employee in 2020. Later on, they passed another act and they said, we're going to add 2021. In 2021, they said you could get 70% of the first $10,000 in wages for each employee for the first, second, and third quarters. So that's 21,000. So you take that 21, you add the 5 from 2020, and you get 26,000. Now, what about the size of the businesses? When they first started, they wanted it to be for small businesses. So they defined a small business for purpose of 2020 is 100 or fewer W-2 employees, full-time W-2 employees. Now, some people get confused and they think it's an FTE. That's not the case. That was what they used in PPP. This is a full-time employee. That means they work 30 hours a week in a month or 130 hours for the entire month or more. So an employee that worked in January, and now we're looking at how many employees they had in 2019. Congress chose 2019 as the year to determine if you were a small business or not for 2020. So if you had an employee that worked 129 hours in January of 2019, that's not a full-time employee. So when they did 2021, they wanted to expand it. So they said a small business was 500 or fewer full-time employees in 2019. Okay. So a business with 100 or fewer employees can qualify for up to $26,000 per employee, and that's nonprofits as well. A business with more than 100 full-time employees in 2019 and 500 or fewer can qualify for 2021, which is up to $21,000 per employee. And they also get credit for part-time employees. So they could have 99 full-time employees in 2019, but in 2020 or 2021, they could have had those 99 employees plus 200 part-time employees. They still get compensated on the wages paid to those employees. So if you're a nonprofit, that was a tough time. And so this can really help you catch up to some degree. And
let me stop you here quick. Sure. I have a quick question for you. So for the employee stuff, if I had So it's in 2019, I can have up to 100 or I can have up to 500 employees.
Full-time employees on average. The way you calculate that is you look at each month of 2019.
But I can have up to 500?
You could have up to 500 full-time employees.
In 2019?
And qualify for 2021.
Okay. So 2020, I don't.
Anything more than 100 full-time employees.
I don't qualify in 2020.
You don't qualify for 2020.
But in 2021, that's the big year anyways, because you get the 3 quarters.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the confusion that everyone faces. I talk to business owners every day or nonprofits who say, well, I was told that we don't qualify. And they were told that by a financial person, a CPA or a bookkeeper. There are 2 ways a business can qualify or a nonprofit. The first we call the gross receipts test, and you compare your revenue for each of the second, third, fourth quarters of 2020 and the first, second, and third quarters of 2021. You compare those back to the same quarter in 2019.
Okay.
So to qualify for 2020 under the gross receipts test, you had to have your revenue, your receipts, gross receipts, drop by 80% or more quarter to quarter. Well, that's a pretty tough one, especially given that during COVID, there was supply chain problems. So supplies were scarce, so prices went up. So businesses had to charge more. So they might have made a lot less money, but they didn't qualify under this test. So for 2021, you had to only go down 20% or more to qualify. But even then, given the inflation, that's a tough bogey to match. But so it's really easy for a CPA or a financial person just to look at your numbers. I mean, it's just the total revenue and compare them and go, oh, you didn't qualify for this, but you did qualify for that. Using that test, I find on average the business receives about 25 to 35% of what they're really entitled to under test 2. Test 2 is a government orders test. This requires a little bit of a legal analysis, but not complicated. In the CARES Act, it said that a business qualifies if its operations were suspended permanently or temporarily by a legitimate government order restricting commerce, gatherings, or travel for COVID reasons. So a legitimate government order that includes federal, state, county, city, and health departments.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So if you think about a nonprofit, how are they going to qualify under the government orders test? Well, most nonprofits I've been on the boards of, we had an annual gala. That's where we raised a ton of money, and it was also a marketing event. We did all kinds of different in-person activities for fundraising and marketing. They all went away. They were outlawed. So that's one way you would qualify. You probably, if you provided any in-person services to the people you're serving, that wasn't allowed. So it's pretty easy to qualify a nonprofit organization under the government orders test.
Okay.
And generally, if they had under 100 employees in 2019, they're going to qualify for all 6 quarters. But we go through that. And so what we do is we gather the documentation from the organization. My office does that. I'm an attorney. And then
About how long does that take for the CFO or the financial person inside the office to gather those documents?
They have to answer 15 questions on a piece of paper about the organization itself. And then they have to pull together their wage reports and their P&Ls. It's almost always less than an hour.
Okay, great.
So it's not time consuming. We do all the calculations. I should say we partner with a tax law firm that we gather the documents, we hand them off to the tax law firm. They confirm that the organization qualifies. They calculate the recovery amount, and then they prepare the amended 941 tax returns that the organization signs, and then we send them off. They send them off to the IRS, and then we wait for and the business would receive a check for each of the quarters that they qualify for.
Okay.
And it can take anywhere from 4 to 8 months to receive the checks. What are the fees? The tax law firm charges 20% contingency. So the organization doesn't owe a penny until it actually has its cash in hand, its tax refund in hand. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yeah. How many, this tax law firm, how familiar are they with ERTC? How many of these have they done? How many have you done?
Yeah, so I've worked with over 300 businesses and nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
And this is all I've done for almost 2 years now. We found out about this when I have a small winery with my wife in Oceanside, California, and we found out that we qualified, even though we'd increased our revenue. So we found a law firm, a tax law firm, and they did it for us, and I loved it. They did a great job. It was found money for me. I didn't mind paying the 20% at all. I didn't know anything until I got it. And then they did. So that tax law firm has done it they've processed the ERTC for over 10,000 different organizations. 10,000. Yeah, it's amazing. I know of another tax law firm that's done 5,700. And by the way, everyone out there is thinking, what about audits? Oh my God, my CPA told me I was.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do you get for that 20% besides the 941s being amended?
You get an audit guarantee, a free audit guarantee.
Tell me about that.
So if the IRS ever has any questions about your ERTC, you just send that letter right over to the tax law firm and they'll handle it, even if it involves litigation ultimately, which it wouldn't. I mean, unless you committed fraud and you were lying about the number of employees and things like that. And that's been happening. But, after PPP and all the fraud we read about, the IRS is pretty uptight about that. And they want to make sure that there's no fraud. So just yesterday, I watched a 2-hour webinar by the IRS, and they glossed right over the 2 ways you qualify, and they spent the bulk of their time on fraud, how to spot the fraud, how, what the penalties are. So that's what they're concerned about.
The webinar was with their employees?
Yeah, it was
okay.
It was actual IRS agents. It was the enforcement team people.
Okay.
So it was serious folks. They're concerned about fraud. They're not concerned about were you sufficiently impacted because you couldn't have fundraisers.
Well, it seems pretty vague.
It's really vague, and I would guess the IRS is going to have a tough time saying, no, you weren't quite, messed up enough.
Yeah.
So they get this audit guarantee. It's very comforting.
And then the other thing too is who signs the 941s? Me as the CEO of the nonprofit, right?
Yeah, CEO or ED generally would be the one who would sign. Whoever signs their normal 941 return. Okay. So someone in the organization,
CFO, whatever,
has to sign their quarterly returns.
So it's my understanding then that somebody from the tax law firm is the signs?
Yeah, so they are the preparers. They sign as a preparer. They have a number, a CAF number with the IRS.
And the attorney is the one, the tax attorney is the one that's, okay.
Yep.
Well, that's huge too, that the tax attorney signs those.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy process for the organization. We've done we've done every kind of organization, right? Chambers of commerce, doctors, medical facility, labs, contractors, home builders.
Okay. No, that's great.
So if someone watching is interested in finding out more information, I have a calendar on the website here, or at the end of this video if they're seeing it not on my website. All they have to do is sign up, and we'll have a half-hour conversation, and I'll walk them through it, and I'll talk to them about how the ERTC applies to their organization and how they can benefit from it.
Great.
Jonathan, thanks, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
Appreciate you, Skip. Thanks so much.